Well, hello, lovely humans, and welcome back to my channel. I know what you're thinking. Jamie, did you change the intro of your video to show off your new pants? No? Maybe? Another thing I may or may not have done for this video is rearrange my family room a little bit so I could stick that bad boy up in the background because it's kind of heavy and I don't want to keep holding it for the video, but I need to keep using it for reference. Today we're going to be doing a DIY terrarium lamp, and I'm so excited to be sharing this with you guys. When Target released these fill your own lamp bases, I was like, I know what I need to be doing with my life. I need to make a terrarium lamp. Oh, it's going to be so epic and I'm so excited. But the whole allure of a terrarium type plant setting is that they should be almost 100% self-sustaining, which for me as a busy mom and a business owner and an all-around full life nut job is definitely a perk. I watched a lot of SerpaDesign's videos here on YouTube to prepare myself to make a terrarium lamp, and I highly, highly, highly recommend checking out his videos if this is something that you guys feel like you want to dive into head first. But for those of you who are just dipping your toes into the terrarium sphere, I wanted to put together something that was pretty easy to understand and really, really fast, which I gotta say, I'm totally thrilled with the results. A couple of things to take note of before we launch into this. One, your materials matter. In order for this to be something that doesn't really require a whole lot of maintenance, you need to make sure you're spending the time procuring all of the right items for your terrarium to have a sustainable ecosystem. Those are a lot of big words. You definitely don't want to go back in and feel like you have to keep managing the plants or the soil, or if it's not draining properly and then everything dies. So making sure you take the correct steps to building the best terrarium for your plants is absolutely essential. Otherwise, it won't be self-sustaining and it's going to require a lot more management from you, and we don't have time for that. The second thing you're going to need to consider is the plants themselves. I have seen some terrarium tutorials, including succulents. This is a big no-no. Succulents do not do well in this kind of environment. Why? Because it's humid and succulents don't like humidity. So you're gonna wanna make sure that you're finding plants whose tags say something along the lines of A, loves humidity, and or B, keeps soil moist, and you're gonna wanna avoid plants that say something like thrives on neglect, because this is such a humid environment that it could be really detrimental to some plants if you just toss them in there and cross your fingers and hope for the best. You're really gonna wanna make sure that the plants that you put in there actually enjoy and need humidity. Otherwise, they're gonna die, and then you're gonna need to redo this, and then the whole point of like building it and leaving alone is kind of moot. Such a weird word, moot. For me, I selected a complete range of plants because I just had a bunch of little ones sitting around because I have a lot of plants. I have some peperomias, some ferns, I threw a spider plant baby in there. I even threw an air plant in one of the displays because they actually take in their water through ambient humidity. Is ambient humidity a term? It is now. I will do my best to list all of the plants that I used in the description box below if you want to use the same ones, but just know that you can kind of use whatever you want in this as long as they do well with humidity. Also, this lighting, Southern California, get your stuff together. So I know that was a lot of me just like explaining stuff before we even launch into the actual tutorial. But again, if you want this to be like a one and done type situation that you only have to maintain every couple of months, you need to make sure you do the proper prep work and you pick the right materials and you pick the right plants. Otherwise, it's gonna be so high maintenance, and that's just stupid. We don't want high maintenance. We want easy, we want simple, and we want pretty. Okay, so first up, supplies. You'll need scissors, window screen, a Sharpie, some chopsticks or tweezers if you happen to think ahead and order them like I didn't, your soil that I will be amending a little bit with some orchid bark, some sphagnum moss, some rocks for drainage, and some charcoal that got literally everywhere. And of course, your terrarium lamp. Using the base of the lamp, I'm going to go ahead and trace out a circle slightly larger than the actual size of the lamp to create a barrier between the gravel and the rest of the substrate, which basically is a fancy term for soil. First step, load in the gravel. You're going to want your gravel to be about 2/3 the height of your soil, which sounds like a very specific measurement, but I just kind of eyeballed it and made sure that there was enough of a drainage layer so none of the water was in contact with the rest of the soil. Placing your pre-cut window screen piece, you're going to want to tuck that in above the gravel. Next comes the charcoal, and this part is messy. This is going to act like a filtration system for any of the water that passes through. So while it's kind of a messy step, it's definitely important. Next, I'm going to use the sphagnum moss. This is going to act as a barrier between the soil and the rest of the items in the terrarium to make sure that really none of that soil leaks through to the bottom, because that would just look gross. And here I'm going to amend my soil just a little bit, taking some of my regular potting soil mix, a handful of orchid bark, and some coconut coir. I'm going to go ahead and mix all of that together. Basically, I want something that holds its moisture well, but still drains. I didn't add perlite because I don't like the look of it particularly, but you can do that if you want added drainage. Scooting in that camera for a closer shot, I'm going to go ahead and load in the soil. And now comes the fun part, the plant arranging. I wanted to make sure that I had a nice balance of textures and heights when putting this together, so I spent a lot of time kind of tinkering about with the different plants I had. Next, I grabbed a piece of partially burned firewood, which sounds like a really random choice, but I wanted to use it as a marker for the back of the lamp. So grabbing the lid, I screwed it on really tight to make sure the log would mark where the cord would be and use that as the back of my display. First, grabbing my Calathea lancifolia, I'm going to gently loosen it from the pot. I don't want to put it in there with all of the soil that's around it. I just want to get it down to almost bare roots. Because we already have soil in there, we don't need all of that around it, but I'm trying to be really careful to not disturb the roots too much. Next, I'm going to grab a pair of scissors and trim off any dead bits because obviously once it's in there, it's going to be really, really hard to trim those off. Making a hole with my fingers, I firmly place the root system down into the soil. And as you can see here, it's a little bit higher than the base of the soil, so I add a little bit more around it to make sure all of the roots are well covered. Next, I'm going to grab my mini arrowhead plant, and this one actually has quite a bit of plants in there, so I'm going to go ahead and separate that because I don't necessarily want the full thing in there. Being very careful not to break too many of the roots, I gently pull that sucker apart. Again, making a hole with my fingers and building up the soil around it, I stick that sucker right on into the terrarium. And basically just get to diving on in with the rest of the plants. If I can find both the scientific names and the common names, I'll be sure to add those in.
Okay, so here's kind of what I've got going so far. I have the Calathea right here, the button fern right here, the mini arrowhead, and then the Pilea or Pellaea, I don't know which one. And I'm not loving that you can see that. I didn't do the screen quite right, but that's why I'm doing this, so you guys can learn from my mistakes. And I don't like the sphagnum moss is showing through, but once the soil kind of settles down, I have a feeling that that will flatten, and that hopefully will start blocking that. If not, maybe I'll just tuck some more soil down in there. But I think what I want to do is I definitely want to do something up here, so I'm just debating on whether or not I want to use this Callisia Bianca repens, which is extremely leggy, which means it has not been getting enough light, or if I want to use this Transcantia zebrina, which again doesn't have a lot of color variegation right now because it has not been getting a ton of light, but it's been rooting water for quite some time now. I just don't know if I want these giant leaves or these itty bitty ones in there. And I kind of want to figure out sticking the spider plant pup in there. So maybe I do that one in the upper corner, and then still need to decide between which of these I want to use. But show must go on. Maybe I just do this one next and kind of go from there. Yeah, I think I'm gonna stick them right there.
So as you can see by my process, this is really more of an art form than it is a science. But I think this is one of the most fun parts about putting this together, is really taking your time to figure out what plants you want where. Adding in a bit more soil to make sure everything's evened out, I'm then going to grab that Callisia Bianca repens that I mentioned and stuff that sucker in there. This is a humidity-loving plant, so hopefully it'll do pretty well. Grabbing some Peperomia cuttings, I'm going to go ahead and stick those in there unrooted and use my chopsticks to place the stems under the soil. I really hope these take, but if they don't, I'll replace them with something else. Now, one thing I did off camera real fast was I poured some filtered water around the inside of the jar to loosen all of the soil and any of the leftover charcoal dust, and to give the plants just a little bit of watering before sealing it up and admiring it in all of its glory. excited by these. And I'm having a really hard time not going back to Target and buying more of these fillable lamps because they are divine. I've had these for a few weeks already and I haven't seen anything not go well. I did have a little bit of molding on a couple of the leaves on one of my Peleas because I got the terrarium too moist. So I simply unscrewed the lid and left it open for a day to let some of that humidity out. And you'll notice if your terrarium starts to develop too much moisture on the sides, you should see some in the morning and I think maybe some in the evening collecting on the sides of the glass. But if it's there all day, then it's too humid in there. So you're gonna wanna open it up, let it air out for a little bit, and then pop that lid back on just to release some of that going on. So I did get one of mine a little bit too moist, and some of the leaves are suffering a little bit because of it, but luckily I caught it in time and I think it's gonna make a full recovery. I hope it's gonna make a full recovery. And another little hack that is I found super helpful is to put a grow light in the top of this lamp to help provide some lighting for the plants to grow. I wanted to stick these in areas that didn't always get the best natural lighting, so I wanted to supplement that with a grow light. Again, I will link that in the description box below to where I got the ones that I happen to love off Amazon. And I love them because they're not purple. I hate purple grow lights. They're the grossest thing ever. So that's what we have for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. If you are inspired to do this, let me know. Tag me on Instagram because I really want to see your terrariums and I want to make sure that everyone just becomes as crazy obsessive about plants as I am. Is that bad? And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.